Howdy, it's Jim Murado, and this is early October 2024. We are still on our Norwegian cruise in Alaska, and we are in Glacier Bay. We spent this entire day basically cruising around Glacier Bay. And what was really cool, and I love national parks, there were national park rangers. They told me they took a boat. I asked them. They took a boat to get to our cruise ship to be present the entire day we cruised around Glacier Bay. And they had a little display set up and they had a gift shop set up, which I thought was really cool and classy. And we got there kind of early. We heard them do a little presentation, and my video didn't turn out good of that, so I'm not going to add that to this. But they had a consistent line all day long of people going to try to talk to them and buy stuff from their little setup gift shop. So I was glad to see that. But anyway, I'm not going to talk much. I'm going to let you just kind of see what we saw, and I'll probably speak up here towards the end of the video. But check this out. This was a real treat to me.
The forecast calls for a high of 46 degrees. Looks like we've got some fog as well. And of course, it is raining.
Look, it's an otter. I don't know. It's moving.
I honestly cannot tell. I don't know if it's a binocular. That's what I'm going with. It's a moose swimming.
Sitting in the valley between the surrounding mountains, especially for that chunky ice. And here we have the Reed Glacier, named after Harry Fielding Reed, a geophysicist and Canadian City Glaciers, who I read that excerpt of his journal from the last time I spoke. And this glacier used to come all the way out into the middle of the bay where we are right now, just over 100 years ago, but has since retreated back 3 miles to where it sits today. This glacier is approximately 4,000 feet or 1,200 meters across, and it's about 125 feet or 30 meters tall at the base. It starts about 9 miles back up the mountain in the Brady ice field and flows down to where we see it right now. And like I said, the glacier is named after Haley Bailey Reed, who first came to Glacier Bay.
Guys, follow the glacier right here!
A massive glacier as well as studies. Reed has left a lasting legacy through expeditions into Glacier Bay. Reed brought flagpoles, stuck them into the glacier at various points. Then he waited and used the flags as reference points for the movement of glaciers. He recorded salt water of icy street that quickly caused it to begin its retreat. Following the glacier's retreat, as soon as they were able, the Tlingit began moving back into their homeland. However, by this time, Glacier Bay had attracted the attention of Anglo-Americans who were interested in the unique environment. When Glacier Bay became a national monument in 1925, legislation made many Tlingit practices illegal and began a painful period of a strained relationship between the Tlingit and the National Park Service. Since then, time has allowed significant healing to take place, beginning with a memorandum of understanding between the Tlingit and the National Park Service in 1995 that first and foremost acknowledged Glacier Bay as Tlingit homeland. Since then, the Tlingit and the National Park Service have worked cooperatively on many projects, including Gulek harvests, a healing totem pole designed by Tlingit elders, and the construction of the Huna Ancestors House, or Huna Shuka Hit, a permanent structure located in Bartlett Cove, memorializing the Tlingit's tie to their homeland.
Huge chunks of ice.
While this healing process is not yet finished, we celebrate what we've accomplished this far. As National Park Service employees, we are incredibly privileged to share joint stewardship of Glacier Bay with those who have lived here since time immemorial. Changing Glacier Bay doesn't only apply to the natural environment. People are a central element to the Glacier Bay story. Humans have been shaping and been being shaped by this landscape for centuries. Before I get off the mic, I'd like to point your attention to the port or left side of the ship, where we're starting to get a view of the magnificent Lamphun Glacier. I'll be back in just a minute to give us some more information about Lamphun. Snow, temperature, gravity, and time. Simply put, these glaciers form when snow falls in a location year after year. First, a layer of snow forms in the mountains, and with cool temperatures, this snow persists through to the next year without melting off completely. Then new snow falls on top, and this snow pile begins to build up. Eventually, the pile grows so large that the snow on top becomes heavy enough that it begins to put a lot of weight on the snow on the bottom. So much so that this weight squishes and compacts the snow on the bottom, forcing out the air in between the particles of snow and turning them into ice. Kind of like when you're playing outside in snow and you go to make a snowball. You grab a handful of snow and use the force of your hands to compact the snow and solidify it into a ball. You want to use a lot of force to make the ball as tightly compact as possible. And this is what the weight of new snowfall is doing to the snow at the bottom of the pile to form our glaciers. But it's doing so with much greater force on a much larger scale. This process of compacting snow into ice continues over many years, where this massive pile of ice grows so large and heavy that gravity comes in and so it causes it to slowly start sliding down the mountain. Now that the pile is moving, it has officially become a glacier. I'll be back in a few minutes to talk about what happens once this glacier starts to melt. A glacier is kind of like a giant river of ice. Like water, once a glacier begins to flow, it will float on the path of least resistance as the pull of gravity forces it down the mountain. Similar to a conveyor belt, ice is moved down the mountain and is replenished by snow falling at higher elevations where the glacier initially formed. This ice will flow down the mountain until it reaches lower, warmer elevations where it will begin to melt. Once the melting starts, the glacier will continue to advance forward until the melting outweighs the amount of new ice being added to the glacier. You can think of it kind of like a bank account. You start out with a certain amount of money in your bank account, much like a glacier starts each year with a certain amount of ice. You earn money and spend money. If you earn more money than you spend, then your bank account will grow. If more ice is being added to the glacier than is melting at the bottom, then the glacier is advancing. But if you're spending more than you're earning, then your bank account will deplete. More ice is melting off of the glacier than is being added, then the glacier is retreating or receding. Glaciers periodically retreat or advance depending on the amount of snow accumulation, evaporation, or melt. And this retreat and advance refers only to the position of the terminus or the face of the glacier. Even as a glacier retreats, it still deforms and it moves down the slope like a conveyor belt. A retreating glacier does not flow uphill, it's simply melting faster than it's flowing. These glaciers are always moving, always either advancing or retreating, never staying in the same place. And it's this constant movement that has brought so much change to the landscape here in Glacier Bay in such a short amount of time. Is the route that your cruise ship takes through Glacier Bay. We're currently heading towards our main glacier viewing of the day, the spectacular Johns Hopkins Glacier, which has just come into view directly in front of us. But having the opportunity to travel to the face of this magnificent glacier is not one that all of Glacier Bay's visitors get. This inlet is actually closed for the majority of the year and only opens to cruise ships starting September 1st. This means that you are all part of the select few that ever get to see the full face of this amazing glacier. During the rest of the year, ships have to stop where we are now, 5 miles away from the glacier's face here at Jaw Point. But why is this inlet closed? It's because of the population of Pacific harbor seals that concentrate here in Johns Hopkins Inlet up close to the glacier. Around 1,700 seals converge here each season for their pupping and mating season. At the beginning of the summer, the Johns Hopkins Inlet becomes the epicenter of seal activity. For miles in front of the glacier, seals hole out on floating ice and females give birth to 25-pound pups. Moms then nurse their pups for about a month, almost doubling the weight of their offspring during this time. As the pups grow into adulthood, their weight will approach that of a football player, around 180 to 280 pounds, and they will eventually measure in at about 5 or 6 feet in length. But when the pups are little, they don't have enough blubber to survive in the cold water, so they instead have to spend the first month or 2 of their lives living on the floating ice chunks in front of the glacier. While these pups are building up their blubber, boat access is restricted. But now that we've reached October, these pups have grown big and strong, and it's now safe for us to travel further towards the glacier. So as we approach the Johns Hopkins Glacier and during our time there, keep an eye out for those sausage-shaped animals on the ice. To be considered an iceberg, a piece of ice must be sticking out at least 16 feet high out of the water. There won't be any pieces in Johns Hopkins Inlet big enough to be considered true icebergs, even accounting for the fact that only about 10% of the ice is visible above the water. The next unit of ice classification is the bergy bit. Yes, they're really called bergy bits. A bergy bit sticks up out of the water at heights between 3 to 16 feet. But the fun names for ice doesn't stop there. Our smallest unit is known as the growler, sticking up about 3 feet or 1 meter above the water. Well, the growler is the quote-unquote smallest ice chunk that we have here. Remember that only 10% of that ice is visible. Even a growler, while it may seem small, is about the size of a pickup truck or a grand piano. And if bergy bits and growlers aren't enough for you, the sound ice makes also has a funny name. Glacial ice is very dense and under tremendous pressure. Trapped inside the ice are air pockets that have been in place since the formation of the ice over 100 years ago. As that air escapes the ice quickly under pressure, it makes a crackling sound, and this is called a bergy seltzer. Bergy seltzer is so loud that it can be detected by sonar close to 100 miles away from the ice producing it. Most of the ice that you'll find floating in the bay will melt within the next 72 hours. Icebergs are born when large chunks calve off of tidewater glaciers. They break up into bergy bits, melt into growlers, and sing a song of bergy seltzer along the way. Glacier Bay is a place that inspires wonder and curiosity. Throughout your time in the bay, you may find yourself asking lots of questions about the glaciers, the wildlife, or the plant life of Glacier Bay. One question I found myself asking is why here? What about the foundations of this landscape allow all of the natural wonders of Glacier Bay to form? And while the glaciers may be the stars of the show, it's the rocks that are the foundation for it all. Glacier Bay sits at the convergence of two major tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. Friction and movement along this fault line created the extreme topography here in Glacier Bay, and in particular it created the mountain range that surrounds our ship, the Fairweather Mountains. At the top of the mountain range is Mount Fairweather, towering 15,266 feet, or 4,653 meters above sea level. For reference, the very tallest peak in the lower 48 states is Mount Whitney at the top of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, which sits at 14,494 feet, or 4,421 meters in elevation, almost 800 feet or 244 meters below Mount Fairweather. Mount Fairweather is also the fourth most prominent peak in the entire United States. It is over 12,000 feet above the surrounding areas. These tall peaks and steep slopes act as a net for catching precipitation. Higher elevations in the Fairweather Mountains can receive over 200 feet of snow each year. The Fairweather Mountain Range is one of the tallest and snowiest coastal mountain ranges in the world, and these tall peaks, coupled with extreme snowfall, create the perfect conditions for glaciers to form. If you found yourself asking questions about the environment here, you're not alone. People have been traveling to Glacier Bay to study the environment here for hundreds of years, asking questions about things like glaciers and plants and geology. Glacier Bay entered the National Park System not only to protect this environment, but also as a living laboratory where we can learn more about the world around us. So what questions do you have about Glacier Bay? What about this place spikes your curiosity? Come to the floating visitor center desk on deck 15 in the observation lounge to ask the rangers about it. If you haven't yet seen one of the sea otters here in Glacier Bay, looks like we have a few of them around our ship right now. One of them just off of the left or port bow, and then a couple over on the starboard or right side as well. You can look for those two little dots in the water, one of those dots being the sea otter's head, and then one of those dots being the flippers that are far behind as they swim through the water.
Right there.
And viewing wildlife like this is one of the ways that we can witness the changes that Glacier Bay has endured. You have such a large diversity of wildlife here in the bay, and this opportunity to see animals in their natural habitat may be one of the reasons you decided to come here to Alaska. While we can't guarantee any sightings, if you've been spending some time searching, you've probably already seen a sea otter. Glacier Bay is home to around 8,000 individual sea otters, making them an easy animal to spot. But it hasn't always been so easy to spot a sea otter here. If you would have taken this cruise just 30 years ago and we had seen a sea otter, we would have brought the ship to a halt and watched the sea otter for as long as we were able to. Sea otters are native to this area, but started to be hunted heavily around the 1700s for their fur. These otters have incredibly dense fur, which made them a valuable commodity to fur traders at the time. They have the densest fur of any animal on the planet, with around 1 million individual hairs per square inch of fur, compared to about 1,000 hairs per square inch for the average human. This dense fur traps air bubbles against the otter's skin, keeping them warm in the cold waters of the bay. After being hunted almost to extinction, sea otters were an incredibly rare sight here in southeast Alaska. Only after these otters were reintroduced with populations from the Aleutian Islands and other areas in Alaska around 35 years ago did we begin to see sea otters in this area. The first sea otter in Glacier Bay was spotted in just 1995, and since then their population has exploded, rapidly growing to around 8,000 individuals. These otters let us once again observe all of the change happening in Glacier Bay, and if you'd like to feel that otter pelt for yourself, feel free to stop by the ranger desk in the observation lounge on deck 15. One question that I'm guessing is on many of your minds is, will we see the glacier calve? That is, will we see those giant ice chunks break off of the glacier and crash into the water below? The answer? Maybe. I truly wish that I had an answer for you, but even people who have studied glaciers for their entire lives cannot predict when or where a glacier will calve. These glaciers do calve every day, but whether it will happen during our time at the glacier's base is beyond me. Your best bet if you're looking to see calving is to keep your eyes on the glacier for as long as you can. But what causes calving in the first place, and why is it so unpredictable? This is a phenomenon only seen in tidewater glaciers, or glaciers whose faces reach the salt water of the bay. Out of the 1,045 glaciers in Glacier Bay, only 7 of them are tidewater glaciers. Although we may not think of the water here as being hot, compared to the ice that makes up our glaciers, the water here is both warm and very corrosive due to its salt content. As a glacier grows out into the bay, some of the glacier will be above the water, and some of the glacier will be below. For this glacier in front of us, the Johns Hopkins Glacier, it reaches almost 300 feet above the water and another 200 feet below. The portion of the ice that is below the water will start to melt as it touches the water. And as it melts off, the glacial ice that's above the waterline now has nothing to rest on. Think of it kind of like a Jenga tower. The salt water is melting the ice underneath the water, taking out some of those Jenga blocks at the bottom of the tower. Eventually, as more blocks are taken out, the top of the tower will no longer be able to stand up and will come crashing down. As lower portions of the glacier are melted by the water, the portions above the water will no longer have anything holding them up and will calve off and come crashing down into the water below. While the calving process may seem simple enough, trying to understand it on a deeper level is a problem scientists have struggled with for decades. Rates of calving often change annually, with calving slowing down or shutting down entirely over the winter. Many different environmental factors, such as melting of the glacier's surface, undercutting of the glacier's face by seawater, all combine to either increase or decrease calving. Because these calving rates are changing annually, it's impossible to develop a method for predicting it. So long story short, the glacier might calve. It might not. Who knows? Like the rest of Glacier Bay, it's changing every day. When you decided to come to Alaska, and especially here in Glacier Bay, what were you looking to experience? Time with family, beautiful scenery, or perhaps wilderness? Alaska is known around the world for its vast wilderness and is often called the last frontier. American poet and environmental activist Gary Snyder wrote, quote, "The soul of Alaska lies in its wilderness. The vast stretches of mountain peaks, endless forests, wide rivers, and deep blue ocean harboring a tremendous diversity of wildlife," end quote. This opportunity for a wilderness experience is likely one of the reasons you wanted to come to Alaska. Getting to experience nature in its truly natural state is hard to come by these days, with approximately 57% of the land on Earth being altered in some way for human use. But in the state of Alaska alone, there is 57.5 million acres of designated wilderness, along with 16.5 million acres of proposed wilderness. Collectively, that's 74 million acres, around the same size as the state of Arizona or the country of Italy. Here in Glacier Bay alone, we have over 2.7 million acres of designated wilderness. Wild areas like this provide an environment that allows us to reconnect with a deeper and more authentic aspect of ourselves. And traveling through this vast wilderness also gives us the opportunity to be incredibly remote. You can take a look at your park map and see that here in front of the Johns Hopkins Glacier, we are approximately 45 air miles away from the nearest road or permanent modern human infrastructure. For comparison, if you are anywhere in the lower 48 states, the furthest away that you can be from a road or piece of modern infrastructure is 21.6 miles if you are standing in the heart of Yellowstone National Park's wilderness. That means that right here and now we are twice as remote as anywhere in the lower 48 states. If you haven't yet, I invite you to take a moment and step away from any devices to truly take in this moment. This is likely the most remote place you've ever been, and maybe the most remote you'll be for the rest of your life. We've now just about arrived at the full view of the absolutely magnificent Johns Hopkins Glacier. What a wonderful view. It can be really difficult to get a sense of scale for these glaciers. Size estimate is really difficult to cross water and there's not much to compare it to. So here are your glacier statistics. Johns Hopkins Glacier stands approximately 300 feet above the water and reaches about 200 feet below. This glacier is about 1 mile wide and reaches about 13 miles into the mountains. But I encourage you to set aside facts and figures because this truly is a special place. Get outside and take lots of pictures, but also take some time to just soak in the scene. The captain and bridge crew have made special arrangements for us to spend a full hour here at the base of this glacier, and we'll make sure to rotate during that time so that if you're seated inside, you'll have an opportunity to view. And keep your eyes on the glacier. As I mentioned, you can calve off chunks of ice at any moment. Also, keep your eyes peeled and binoculars ready for birds, including kittiwakes or glaucous-winged gulls. We also see harbor seals occasionally hauled out on the ice chunk in this area too. And I'll remind you that this is these animals' homes, and the bay provides everything that they need. So please help us out by respecting these wild animals and not feeding them, including the birds. Human food can be toxic to them, and feeding wildlife in a national park is a violation of federal law. I'll be getting off the microphone for about an hour to be able to join you all out on deck, and Rangers Dan and Nate will also be closing down and walking around outside. And we're wearing our signature Ranger hats if you're looking to flag one of us down. If you have any questions, we'd love to talk to you. We're from the government and we're here to help, as they say. I'll be back on the mic with some more commentary as we begin to make our way away from the glacier space. I hope to see you all outside.
Yeah. So what'd you think? I've really enjoyed her narration. By the way, the next, I don't know, minute or so of this video, I've kind of sped it up. It's about 5 times. It's going 5 times faster than a normal video, but I just thought I'd show you a little bit of a time-lapse video as we are on the cruise ship, just for the heck of it, just to add something different to the video. I hope you don't mind. Yeah, so the ranger, the young ranger lady would speak up and talk just ever so often, and I really enjoyed her narration, even if it didn't go along specifically with the glacier or anything. I just thought that was a huge bonus. So, and I didn't get all of her narration. We did get up and walk around at times. We were actually in a little bar on the cruise ship. We walked around for a while. Lots of places were very crowded, but we found a bar, and they weren't even open or serving anything, but it was a perfect place to get a good look out the window and it wasn't far from an area where we could kind of go look out and see the glacier and what was going on too if we wanted to. We did see some wildlife, and by the way, if you happen to notice anything on my video that I didn't catch, let me know, because the wildlife was microscopic to us at points from where we were setting. So if you notice something, yeah, drop me a message and let me know. I know we caught a little something there earlier on camera, but yeah, that was about the only thing I really pointed out. And I'll probably come back and talk a little bit before this video ends.
Once again, Ranger Akasha talking from the bridge. Just to make sure our sound's still working, if you're standing on the balcony, wave up at the bridge. Awesome! Hi guys! Well, it was great to see and talk to so many of you when we were down at the glaciers. We got some great cabin while we were down there, which was so wonderful to see. And we're now going to make our way to Johns Hopkins Glacier. We're going to be heading out of this inlet, passing back by the Lamplugh Glacier again, before starting to head down and south out of Glacier Bay. And although our main glacier viewing of the day is starting to wrap up, our day is far from over. The afternoon is a great time for wildlife spotting, so keep your eyes out on the shorelines to maybe spot some animals as we start to make our way down. And as a reminder, Alaska Geographic is still open and selling merchandise like those flash drives that I mentioned earlier with the photographs from Glacier Bay. They'll be open until 1:30 this afternoon, so make sure to stop by before they close up. And next to Alaska Geographic, we also still have our ranger desk. If you didn't get a chance to find one of us rangers out of the face of the glacier, feel free to head to the observation deck on deck 15, and we'd love the chance to answer any questions. Today we've been talking a lot about the changes that Glacier Bay has experienced over time. But what about the changes that we've seen today? If you were awake early this morning as you entered into Glacier Bay, you may have looked to the coast and seen lush forests filled with tall trees. But take a moment and look to the shorelines now. Does it look any different? As we travel through Glacier Bay, you may have noticed that the plant life has dwindled as we've grown closer to the glaciers. The plants have slowly gotten smaller up until we reach the land at the face of the glacier, which is completely barren. And we are witnessing the process of plant succession, or the development of plant communities over time. As a glacier retreats, a barren landscape emerges from underneath the ice. And once this ice is gone, plants and animals slowly begin to recolonize the area. This process starts with lichens and mosses. The lichens secrete an acid that actually starts to break down rock and create a very thin layer of soil. Then alders and cottonwoods and willows will take root in this thin layer of soil, and these trees are deciduous, meaning they drop their leaves every year. And these dead leaves break down and add nutrients to the soil, making the area fertile for its next inhabitants, the conifers, specifically our spruce and hemlock trees. If you haven't yet today, I encourage you to take a moment to witness the stages of this succession. At the face of the glaciers, take notice of the barren landscape where the glacier has recently retreated. Then, as we travel south towards the mouth of Glacier Bay, where the land has been exposed from the ice longer, notice that the plant life begins to flourish as we reach the mature spruce and hemlock forests of the lower bay. Remember that meaningful, lasting change requires effort and patience. This place is continuously changing. That process of succession is an ongoing one. I can tell you from experience that no 2 days in Glacier Bay are the same. With this change occurring constantly all around us, take a minute to appreciate the present moment. This area will never look just like it does today ever again. Area that connected to places around the country and around the globe. People have been looking to Glacier Bay for over 100 years and using what they see here to understand the effects of glaciers in places like California, New York, Wisconsin, and so many more. Being here in Glacier Bay has especially allowed me to connect more to my home state of Michigan. Michigan has a pretty extensive history of glaciation, with the entire Great Lakes having been carved by glaciers. Before coming here, I had a vague understanding that glaciers covered a lot of North America at one point in time, but beyond that, I had no clue how impactful glaciers truly are. What I've learned since being here in Glacier Bay is that many of the things that I love so much about home are there because of glaciers. The sand dunes I grew up hiking on, the kettle ponds near my house, the giant rocks that look like they've been placed down by a giant, all were formed by glaciers. At first glance, Glacier Bay is like another world, but the longer I look, the more pieces of home I find. The study of glaciers here have given us insight not only to our unique environment here, but it also connects us to other areas throughout the country and planet. From Long Island in New York City to Yosemite Valley in California, we can see the effects of glaciers all over the world. Look around and see if you can find any pieces of home here in Glacier Bay. Up until about 14,000 years ago. But here in Glacier Bay, our ice age is a bit more recent. Right now, we're heading out of the Johns Hopkins Inlet, and currently we're right about in front of Jaw Point, about 5 or 6 miles away from the face of the glacier. And the area where we sit right now was covered in ice as recently as 1912, just 112 years ago. And this, I think, is one of the most special things about Glacier Bay, that we get to see and feel the impact of these glaciers in a way not seen anywhere else on the planet. And the area where we are now was covered in ice as recently as 1912. The telephone invented when this area was entirely covered in ice. Abraham Lincoln served as president when this area was entirely covered in ice. Most of your great-grandparents or even grandparents were alive when the area we are right now was fully covered in ice. Temperatures here are rising at more than double the rate as the rest of the planet, with Alaska experiencing a rise of about 3 degrees Celsius, while the rest of the world has experienced a 1 degree Celsius increase since 1949. While this may not seem like a large number, even slight changes in temperature make a huge difference. Here in Glacier Bay, we're seeing a significant loss in habitat, increased ocean temperature and acidity, as well as abnormal glacial retreats. Mountain goats like the ones that we saw this morning are one species that's especially vulnerable to climate change.
All right. And I believe that was all the narration I got on the cruise, which again was really cool. And I'll tell you the whole story as we wind down. I've still got some video I want to put up, so I'll chat a little bit. Feel free to mute me or whatever. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. But so we got up, we got ready. You know, we knew the whole day would be in Glacier Bay, and we really didn't have a big plan, and we were with our friends. So my wife and I went down to where the park rangers were, kind of in that little lounge area that you saw at the very beginning of the tape. And one of the rangers did a presentation about Glacier Bay, and he talked for a while. And of course, it was getting really crowded down there. You had people down there having breakfast and just getting their day going, and then you had people who wanted to hear the presentation. It was actually pretty well managed. It's just a cruise ship. You've got 4,000 people on it, and I don't think they really know how many people are going to turn out for any event. But it had a good turnout, and like I said, there was a line where you could go up and see some of their little information cards, and they had some furs that you could actually touch, and learn a little bit about the animals and what's going on out here. And then, of course, they had a gift shop, like I mentioned. And, I'm a national park person. I love parks. Anytime we visit a national park, I try to get at least a patch, and maybe a hiking stick medallion or a pin, some postcards. I don't mind dropping some coin at a national park gift shop. One of the things they had that I thought was really cool is you could, quote, adopt an animal. It was $40. It was basically, you're making a donation to the park, and you got a stuffed animal and a little certificate that you adopted him, and a bag also, like a really nice little national park bag. It's stuff that if you just bought it flat out, you wouldn't be spending nearly $40, but I thought that was cute, and we did one. That's a very cute gift to give to one of your favorite kids back home from your cruise. And we adopted a whale, and we got our little certificate and our stuffed animal in our bag. And of course, I picked up a patch and a few other items. Our friends later on, they wanted to go do the same thing, but they were out of whales by the time they got there. So I think they adopted a puffin, which was a pretty cute little toy too. So we did that, and then we kind of roamed around the ship, trying to scout out a good spot to watch. And they had a really nice lounge on this ship, but yeah, again, with 4,000 people on the ship, it was very crowded. It was a good place to watch, but man, I don't like being in big crowded places. Of course, if you got there early and got a good seat, you were kind of okay, but then you'd have other people hovering around you. It just wasn't the vibe I wanted. We thought about watching from our balcony in our room, which was very acceptable, but our friends found this little bar that they liked was open. It wasn't open serving drinks, but you could go in there, and they had some very nice windows and a very nice area to kind of casually watch as the ship turned around and looked at the glacier. And the audio system was really good in there too, so when the park ranger did her narration, you could really, well, you could hear what she was saying, and I appreciated that. A couple times the bar, it wasn't crowded, but people were talking a little bit, but I think for the most part we got a lot of that audio and we were able to hear her, and I liked that. Some of that stuff is pretty trippy if you go back and listen to it, where she talks about being isolated and being away from society, and how that area is constantly changing. It kind of makes you a little melancholy. It's kind of weird thinking about if I come back here again, it's not going to be the same place. And of course, every place is like that. Your bedroom, your house, nothing is really the same from any moment to another. But yeah, it's kind of something to kind of think about. Also, I know as a fan of national parks in particular, and state parks, regional parks, that kind of thing, I've taken note when I go to a lot of national parks lately that at this point in life, it's almost impossible to truly get away from it all. Unless you kind of hike into the Smoky Mountains or the Badlands or somewhere, unless you really hike, maybe take a day or two to get truly away from everything, it's almost impossible to be away from everything. In the last year or so, I know we took a trip down to Georgia, and we stopped at a couple of parks that I almost felt like I could feel like I was away from everything. And then you'd hear an airplane go by, or you could hear an 18-wheeler in the distance. Even a train, and I love trains, but it is getting harder and harder to truly be away from, society, and to truly get out into nature. When I was younger, growing up in western Kentucky, very, very rural western Kentucky, I remember my cousin and I, when we were little boys, we were out in the middle of nowhere. You could go lay down in the middle of the road and have nothing to worry about. I don't recommend that. It was not a good idea back then. But there just wasn't traffic, and we would just go and look up at the stars, and we would see several shooting stars a night. That was not uncommon. And the skies were so clear. And even to this day, when I go back to that part of western Kentucky, it's much more, it's clearer than I would expect to see in a city like Lexington or Louisville. But it is not, it's not what I remember it being. But yeah, it's pretty much impossible to get away from it all now. Yeah, that does make me a little sad when I think about it. And even now, she was talking about how we're pretty isolated at this point on our cruise. Possibly more so than we ever will be in life ever again. But we're still on a cruise ship with 4,000 of our closest friends, eating gourmet meals every night. It's not exactly rugged and roughing it. but it is something to consider and think about while you're here. On our previous cruise, we did the Inside Passage cruise last time, and we were going to go into a couple of little glacier areas. And we did end up going into one of them, but one of the other spots we were going to go into, we really didn't get that far because the weather was so bad, and the captain decided that it would be best not to. The captain on that ship did a Q&A a couple of days later, and somebody asked him about that decision. And his logic, it was almost, he was talking about being concerned about everybody's safety and that kind of thing. Another ship had been through there earlier, and they were having some issues. And it was kind of sweet, hearing his logic for why he decided to turn around. So it was still, even though we really didn't quite get to the glacier, it was a very interesting adventure, and it was still a story to tell. And I've put up videos. If you look around my YouTube channel, I think I have an Alaskan cruise playlist, and I've got videos of that other stuff up elsewhere. And as I mentioned, this was our second cruise to Alaska. We did another cruise in 2022. It was on a smaller ship. It held about 2,000 passengers. This ship held 4,000, and it still did well. I mean, it wasn't as big of a cluster as I expected it to be. It is 4,000 people, and it is a bigger ship, and you did notice that. But generally, when we would get to ports and we would get off the ship, it wasn't that bad. It didn't take as long as I expected that it might. I will say that in general, of the two cruises, I did prefer the 2,000 person ship over the 4,000, and I enjoyed the Inside Passage cruise the most. I felt like we got the most out of that cruise. On this bigger ship that we were on here, and by the way, the ship we're on now is the Encore, the Norwegian Encore. I felt like they had just a ton of entertainment. Almost an excessive amount of entertainment. On the smaller ships, it seemed like there would be a big show maybe around 7 o'clock, a magician, something like a Cirque du Soleil kind of thing, a comedian. And it would be, pretty big. Everybody would kind of show up for it, and it was nice. And then you might have a few other kind of side shows, maybe a 70s tribute act at one of the bars. I kind of felt like on this ship, the 4,000 person ship, there were just a ton of shows and a ton of events going on constantly. And instead of going, okay, tonight at 7 we'll go see the comedian or the magician, you just sort of wandered around after you had dinner, and you found, one of the small bars might have a Latin singer, or an 80s tribute band or something like that. By the way, there were a couple of great bands on this ship. There was an 80s tribute act, and then there was a female singer that we heard a couple times that we liked a lot. She was kind of doing country and some classic rock. I can't remember her name, but yeah, I mean, just even the little tribute and cover bands we heard were a lot of fun. And I have found when we've done cruises that the staff is always, they're multitasking. They are on it. On our previous cruise, we did a painting class, like a little 1 hour. We painted the northern lights and some trees by a lake. It was cute. Pretty cool souvenir to take home with us too from an Alaskan cruise. But we had a very nice, I guess you would say, teacher of that class. And a day or two later, on one of our excursions, she was on our excursion with us. And, I told her, hey, you taught us how to paint the other night. And she told us that she also teaches aerobic classes, I think dancing. The people on the cruise, man, I think they kind of have to prove that they can wait tables if needed or teach a class. It was pretty cool. It was pretty interesting, and it was kind of fun talking to her about that. But yeah, the workers on the cruise ship, man, they have a real hustle to them. If I were interviewing people for a job these days, if they put down that they had cruise ship experience, I would definitely want to talk to them. because this is hard work, and there were several times we would see people early in the morning, and then we would see them again late at night. And we even had wait staff at restaurants. We would see them at one restaurant, then see them again at a different restaurant. That was not uncommon. But yeah, we enjoyed being in Alaska a second time. We enjoyed some of the ports that we hit the first time. We enjoyed seeing those places again. And man, in general, I'm not a cruise person. I'm not a huge fan of just cruising. Oh, there's a nice angle. I'm not a fan of just cruising, but cruise ships do get you to places that are otherwise hard to get to, and I like that. We're talking about doing another cruise. We're sort of committed to doing another cruise with Norwegian, and we think we're going to try to do something a little more outside of the US and Canada for our next one. But we definitely want to do Alaska again. I kind of get it. I know my wife's aunt and uncle, they do a lot of cruising. I mean, like a lot of cruising. And they've been to Alaska many, many times. And I totally get that. I can see why people would want to go back to Alaska over. I mean, look at that. This is ridiculous. And, on this cruise, on our first Alaskan cruise, we went with my wife's aunt and uncle. They're a mature couple, very slow paced. They're very calm. And then on this cruise, we went with a younger couple of friends of ours. And, it was kind of a different way to experience a cruise. And we had a very good time on both of them. But, there's just so many ways to experience a cruise. If you want to go and see Alaska and drink a lot, you can do that. If you want to go see Alaska and take it nice and slow, you can do that too. And that's something cruise lines offer. Anyway, if you stuck with me this long, thank you. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you.